The barista's hands trembled as she placed my latte on the table, and at 63, I recognized that slight shake instantly. It wasn't age or cold, it was raw emotion. I'd seen it in my own mirror often enough lately. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said softly, sliding into my usual booth at Willow Brew, the little downtown cafe that had become my sanctuary ever since Robert retired 4 years ago. The house felt too large and too silent on weekday mornings, especially when he disappeared into his home office for hours of consulting calls that supposedly kept our retirement comfortable. The new barista looked to be about my age, which was rare in a place usually staffed by 20-somethings. She had soft gray curls pinned back loosely, warm brown eyes framed by gentle laugh lines, and the quiet poise of someone who had lived a full life before stepping behind a coffee counter. "I'm Laura," I offered, stirring a touch of cream into my drink. "I've been coming here almost every morning for 2 years now. You're new?" "Claire Bennett," she answered, with a smile that lit her whole face. "Started just 10 days ago, midlife career switch at 61. My kids think I'm having some kind of breakdown." She laughed lightly, but there was real warmth in it. "What did you do before?" "Elementary school teacher for 38 years, 3rd and 4th grade mostly. Loved the children, but after I retired, I realized I missed people more than I expected. Pouring coffee feels like a small way to stay connected." Something about Claire reminded me of the dedicated women I'd known during my own 35 years running the children's department at the public library. Patient, thoughtful, always ready to listen. "Teaching must have taken everything you had. Do you have family nearby?" "My younger sister Anna lives 15 minutes away. She's the one who talked me into trying something new instead of just rattling around an empty house." As Claire spoke, she absently turned the wedding band on her left hand, catching the morning light that poured through the wide windows. The ring was stunning, platinum with a circle of tiny diamonds that sparkled like stars. "That's a gorgeous ring," I said, genuinely admiring it. "Anniversary present," Claire replied, her voice softening with unmistakable joy. "Our 14th, actually. Robert had it custom made to match my original band. He told me he wanted me to look at it every day and remember how lucky he felt that I said yes to sharing the rest of his life." The name slammed into me like a fist to the chest. Robert. I forced my voice to stay steady. "Robert Reynolds." "Yes," she beamed, "the most thoughtful man alive, always surprising me with little gifts, planning weekend getaways just because. I never imagined I'd find this kind of love again at my age." My cup clattered against the saucer when I set it down. My hands had started shaking too. "Are you all right, dear? You've gone pale." I swallowed hard. "I'm sorry, could you tell me a little more about your husband, how you met?" Her face glowed as she leaned against the counter. "It's actually quite romantic. We met in a grief support group about 15 years ago. I'd lost my first husband to a sudden heart attack, and Robert had lost his wife to breast cancer. He was so broken, carrying so much guilt for not noticing the signs sooner. We just understood each other." Breast cancer. My breath caught. Claire went on, oblivious. "He was incredibly patient while I healed, never pushed, said he knew exactly how deep grief could cut because he'd lived it too. His wife's name was Laura, funny enough, same as you. He still tears up talking about her. Said she was the kindest woman, a librarian who adored children's books and gardening." The room tilted. According to Claire, I had died of breast cancer in 2009. Robert had mourned me, found comfort in a support group, and eventually built a beautiful new life with her. Except I was sitting 3 feet away, very much alive, staring at the woman who thought she'd been married to my husband for 14 years. If my story hit you the way it still hits me some mornings, please subscribe to the channel. There are more stories like mine, raw, real, and full of hard-won hope, and I'd love for you to stay with me for the next one. I needed air. Claire, would you mind watching my things for just a moment? I'll be right back. Of course, take your time. I fled to the restroom, locked the stall door, and pressed my back against the cool tile wall while my mind raced. Robert hadn't simply cheated. He had constructed an entirely separate life, complete with a second wife who believed their marriage was real and sacred. When I returned, Claire was wiping down the counter. A splash of industrial cleaner had landed on her hands. "This stuff is brutal on skin," she muttered, slipping off her wedding ring to rinse properly. Without thinking, she set it on my table beside my untouched latte. I stared at it, and then my heart stopped. Engraved inside the band, in the same elegant script I knew by heart, were the words RR and CB together forever. I glanced at my own left hand, at the ring I'd worn without removing it for 39 years. Inside mine, RR and LB together forever. Same jeweler, same style, same promise, only the initials changed. Claire returned, drying her hands. "Robert always fusses at me to wear gloves when I clean, but old teacher habits die hard." I couldn't breathe. "Claire," I said, voice barely above a whisper, "may I show you something?" I removed my own ring and placed it beside my cup so the engraving faced her. She leaned in, curious. Then her expression shifted. Confusion, then dawning horror. "RR and LB forever," she read slowly. "LB. Laura Bennett? But that would mean—" "I've been married to Robert Reynolds since 1986, I said gently. 39 years, and I'm very much alive." All color drained from her face. She gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Robert's first wife, Laura, died of breast cancer in 2009. He showed me pictures of her garden, told me how much she loved the library story hours." "I am that Laura," I said. "I never had cancer. I've been living with Robert in our home on Sycamore Lane every single day for the last 15 years, including the years he's apparently spent married to you." Claire's eyes filled with tears. "You're saying my marriage isn't real?" "I'm saying one of our marriages isn't legal, and since mine was first, I'm afraid yours is the one that isn't." She sank into the chair across from me as though her legs had given out. "But he loves me," she said brokenly. "He's devoted. He's here with me half the month, and when he's traveling for consulting, he calls every night at 8:30 without fail." Half the month. The pieces snapped together with sickening clarity. When Robert told me he was away on consulting trips to meet clients in neighboring counties, he was here with Claire. When he told her he was traveling, he was home with me, cooking dinner, sleeping in our bed, bringing me lilies every Sunday just because. For the next 2 hours, after the morning rush ended and the cafe grew quiet, Claire and I sat in that booth and compared lives like two detectives piecing together a crime scene. He brought her tulips every Thursday evening to brighten the weekend. He brought me lilies every Sunday morning to start the week with beauty. He wore the cedar and citrus cologne only on date nights with her. He wore the same cologne only when we attended the symphony together. He called her every morning at 7:45 to wish her a beautiful day. He called me every afternoon at 4:15 to ask how my day was going. He had told her his consulting required 2 weeks away each month. He had told me the same. Claire lived in a lovely bungalow on Cedar Ridge Drive, only 18 minutes from our house on Sycamore Lane. He had purchased it in 2011, telling her it came from wise investments during his first marriage. I remembered 2011 clearly. Robert had convinced me to refinance our paid-off home, saying lower interest rates would free up funds for retirement travel. We cashed out $220,000 in equity. I now knew exactly where that money had gone. "Claire," I said carefully, "do you have a copy of your marriage certificate?" She hesitated. Robert handled all the paperwork, said it was simpler that way since we were both older and wanted something small. We had a beautiful garden ceremony in spring 2010, just my sister Anna, a few friends from the grief group, and the officiant. Was the officiant licensed? I assumed so. Robert arranged everything. I felt a wave of pity mixed with fury. Claire had been given a fake wedding, complete with witnesses who likely believed the story of Robert's widowed status. By the time we parted that afternoon, we exchanged phone numbers and made a plan. Claire would call her sister Anna, a recently retired detective sergeant, and ask for help. I would go home and begin quietly gathering whatever evidence I could find. I never imagined that at 63 I would be searching my own husband's office for proof he was a criminal. But that is exactly what I did the following morning. Robert left at 8 a.m. for his weekly golf game with old colleagues, a 4-hour window I now suspected was spent with Claire. I went straight to his locked file cabinet. I'd known the combination for decades, our wedding date. Inside were 3 meticulously labeled folders that turned my stomach. The first contained our legitimate joint accounts, tax returns, and deeds, everything documenting our real 39-year marriage. The second held statements for accounts I'd never seen, showing regular transfers totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars over 15 years. The third was labeled Personal Correspondence and contained anniversary cards, love letters, and printed photos of Robert and Claire, vacations in Maine, holiday celebrations, intimate dinners. In one photo dated October 12, 2018, they toasted their 8th anniversary at a waterfront restaurant. Robert wore the navy blazer I'd given him for our 35th anniversary the year before. The love letters were the worst. The same tender phrases he'd written to me in our early years, now addressed to Claire. "You healed a heart I thought was broken forever. Every day with you feels like the gift I never dared hope for again." I photographed everything with my phone, hands trembling so badly some images blurred. At exactly 4:15 p.m., my phone rang, Robert's daily check-in. "Hello, darling," he said cheerfully. "How was your morning?" "Quiet," I managed, "just catching up on some organizing." "Perfect. I'll be home by 6. Shall I pick up Ty on the way?" "That would be lovely." "I love you, Laura." "Love you too," I replied automatically, then hung up and ran to the bathroom to be sick. That evening, I met Claire and her sister Anna at a quiet diner across town. Anna was tall, silver-haired, with sharp gray eyes that missed nothing. She listened without interruption as we laid out the timeline, the rings, the financial transfers, the parallel routines. When we finished, she exhaled slowly. "Ladies, what you're describing is long-term bigamy combined with financial fraud. My department investigated a similar case 10 years ago. Guy kept 2 families 40 miles apart for 12 years. The logistics are staggering, but it's possible with careful planning and separate financial trails." "How much money are we talking?" Claire asked, voice small. Anna flipped through the photos I'd forwarded. Rough estimate from these statements, close to $900,000 diverted over 15 years. That's felony-level theft from the marital estate, Laura. I felt the floor drop out again. Anna continued, "We need more evidence before confronting him. Phone records, credit card statements in the second name, utility bills for the Cedar Ridge house, maybe GPS data if he uses a car with tracking. I still have friends in the department who can help quietly." Claire looked stricken. "Anna, do you think there could be others?" "It's possible," Anna said gently. "Men capable of this level of compartmentalization sometimes have more than 2 lives. But let's focus on what we know." For the next week, the 3 of us worked like a covert team. Claire searched the Cedar Ridge house while Robert was with clients, meaning with me. She found more letters, travel receipts charged to cards I'd never seen, and a second phone hidden in a locked drawer, passcode our fake anniversary date, 05152010. I documented every inconsistency in Robert's stories over the past decade, photographed additional bank records, and copied files from his laptop while he showered. Anna ran quiet background checks and confirmed the officiant at Claire's wedding had never held a valid license in the state. By the end of the week, we had a thick folder of irrefutable evidence. And then I did something small but deeply satisfying. I transferred $5,000 from our joint checking into a new account in my name only, the exact amount Robert had withdrawn in cash the previous month for client entertainment. When he noticed the missing funds a few days later and asked about it, I looked him in the eye and said calmly, "I made a donation to the Library Foundation, thought it was time to support something that matters." The flicker of unease in his expression was worth every penny. For the first time in 15 years, I had taken back a tiny piece of control. Anna scheduled the confrontation for the following Saturday morning, back at Willow Brew, neutral ground where Robert couldn't make a scene or flee easily. I invited him to brunch at that new cafe everyone's talking about. He arrived smiling, carrying a small bouquet of daisies, my favorite when we were dating. The gesture that once melted me now felt like watching an actor hit his mark. The cafe was quiet. Claire was behind the counter finishing her shift. Anna sat at a corner table pretending to read. Robert helped me off my coat, ever the gentleman. "This place has charm," then froze when he spotted Claire approaching with 2 coffees. His face cycled through shock, calculation, and finally defeat. "Laura, perhaps we should—" "Sit down, Robert," I said quietly, "we're exactly where we need to be." Anna stood and joined us. "Robert Reynolds, I'm Anna Bennett, Claire's sister. I believe you know both of these women very well." Claire set the coffees down with only the slightest tremble. "Hello, Robert. Laura and I have become acquainted." Robert sat heavily. All color had left his face. "How long have you known?" he asked me. 10 days, I replied, since Claire and I compared wedding rings. He closed his eyes briefly. "I can explain." "You're going to," Anna said evenly, "but first you're going to listen." For the next hour, in hushed tones so other patrons wouldn't overhear, we laid out the evidence. Photos of documents, timelines, financial trails, the fake wedding, the second phone. Robert's defenses crumbled quickly. There were no others, he insisted tearfully, just Claire and me. He claimed he loved us both genuinely, that he'd convinced himself we were each happier not knowing, that choosing would have destroyed him. Claire's voice shook with fury and heartbreak. "You didn't get to decide our happiness, Robert. You stole our choices. You stole 15 years of my life with lies. And 15 years of mine," I added. "Years I thought we were building something honest." He begged for private resolution, offered to deed Claire the Cedar Ridge house, promised therapy, anything to avoid criminal charges. Anna was unmoved. "Bigamy is a felony. Financial fraud spanning 15 years using marital assets is multiple felonies. You'll be lucky to avoid prison, Mr. Reynolds." In the end, he agreed to full financial disclosure and restitution in exchange for our agreement not to push for the maximum charges. But both marriages, real and fraudulent, were over. 6 months later, the divorce was final. Robert moved to a small apartment across the state, near his brother, under strict probation after pleading to reduced fraud counts. He would spend his remaining years making restitution payments. Claire kept the Cedar Ridge house, Robert signed it over freely to avoid deeper legal trouble, and continued working at Willow Brew. She said the routine and the people kept her grounded. I sold the Sycamore Lane house, the one filled with too many memories, both real and poisoned, and moved into a sunny condo downtown, within walking distance of the cafe. Anna helped me through every step: legal meetings, financial untangling, even packing boxes when memories threatened to drown me. One evening, 8 months after the confrontation, Anna brought dinner to my new place: homemade lasagna and a bottle of good red wine. We ate on the balcony, watching the city lights come on. "You've been incredible through all this," I told her. "I don't know how I'd have managed without you." She studied me for a long moment. At first, I was doing it for Claire. She's my little sister. Seeing her world shattered like that gutted me. But somewhere along the way, it became about you too, Laura. You didn't deserve what he did. No one does. The air between us shifted, quiet and charged. "Anna," I said carefully, "I'm 63, freshly divorced from a bigamist, and still learning how to trust my own judgment again. I'm not sure I'm ready for anything new." She smiled gently. "I'm 65, divorced 15 years myself, and perfectly content with my own company, but I'd like to keep sharing dinners and walks and honest conversation, if you're open to that." I looked at her, steady, kind, unflinchingly honest, and felt something loosen inside my chest that had been knotted for longer than I realized. I'd like that very much. Over the next year, our friendship deepened into something neither of us had expected, but both of us cherished. We took it slowly, no grand gestures, no recycled romance, just two people choosing truth every single day. Claire teased us mercilessly, but with genuine joy. She became the sister I never had, and watching her bloom into her own confident, independent self was one of the greatest gifts to come from all the pain. 2 years after the day my world cracked open in a cafe booth, Anna and I stood in the garden courtyard of the public library where I'd worked for decades. A small circle of friends and family gathered: Claire as my maid of honor, my children who had weathered the storm with grace, Anna's nieces and nephews. We wrote our own vows, simple and unflinching. "I promise to choose honesty with you every day," Anna said, sliding a plain gold band onto my finger. "To listen when it's hard, to speak truth even when it's uncomfortable, and to build a life where you never have to wonder." "I promise the same," I answered, voice steady. "To trust what we create together, to speak my needs and fears openly, and to love you without illusion or performance." Claire handed us each a single daisy, my favorite flower since girlhood, and grinned through happy tears. As we walked back down the petal-strewn path hand in hand, I glanced at the ring on my finger. Inside, engraved in clear script, AR and LB, truth always. No recycled promises, no room for secrets. Just two women in our 60s who had survived betrayal and chosen something real. That evening, back on our balcony, now hours together, watching the same city lights, Anna raised her glass. To second chapters written in truth. I touched my glass to hers. To knowing exactly who comes home to me every night and why. Some women discover their husband's deepest betrayal and close the door on love forever. I discovered mine and opened a new door to the most honest love I'd ever known. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to rebuild after trust was shattered, please share your own experience in the comments below. You're not alone. And if you want to hear more stories of women finding strength and real love after heartbreak, subscribe to the channel. I have so many more to share.